All right, this video is about converting fractions, decimals, and percents into the other two. Okay, how do I express fractions as a decimal? You can use long division, where the numerator goes in and the denominator goes out. Let me show you what that means. So we want to express 3/8 as a decimal. We begin with long division. Okay, you set up your house. You place the numerator on the inside of the house, the denominator on the outside of the house. Okay, add a decimal and a 0 as needed. So 8 can't go into 3, so I'm going to add a decimal and 2 zeros. I'm going to make sure that I align a decimal up at the top, and then I'm going to start dividing. 8 can't go into 3, so it's 0. 8 can go into 30 3 times. I multiply, that gives me 24. I subtract those two numbers, I get 6. I bring down, that gives me 60. 8 goes into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. I subtract, I get 4. I add another 0. I bring down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. That's exactly 40. Subtract, and I get 0. And there's our answer. 3/8 is 0.375 as a decimal. Okay, and your answer will terminate or eventually repeat. Okay, let's do 3/4 as a decimal. Same setup, numerator on the inside, denominator on the outside, add a decimal and a 0, make sure I put that decimal lined up at the top, divide, subtract, bring down, multiply, subtract, and there's our answer, 0.75. How do I express mixed numbers as decimals? You want to set up long division on the fraction part, and then place the whole number in front of the decimal. So let's say we want to convert 5 1/8 to a decimal. Set up long division on the fraction part and complete the division. So we're just going to focus on the eighth. We're not going to worry about the 5. We're just going to focus on the 1/8 fraction. Same setup as before. I do the numerator on the inside, denominator on the outside, place a decimal and a 0 when I need them. Okay, line up a decimal at the top, divide. 8 can't go into 1, but it can go into 10 here. Goes in 1 time, multiply, subtract, bring down. 8 can go into 20 2 times, subtract, bring down. 8 can go into, bring down, 40 5 times, subtract, and we get that, 0.175. Now that's just the eighth. Now we just take the whole number, the 5, and place it in front. So 5 1/8 is 5.125. Okay, and this would be our final answer. So we solve the decimal for the fraction and then put the whole number in front of the decimal. That's how we do mixed numbers into your decimals. Okay, 12 5/8, same process. Divide the 5 by the 8. Okay, I get 0.625. That's for the 5/8. And then I place the 12 in front of the decimal. And there's my answer, 12.625. How do I express decimals as a fraction? Convert decimals to base 10 fractions. And then simplify. Example, 0.4. Well, 0.4 is really 4/10. And then 4/10 can reduce to 2/5. Where did I get the tenths? I read it here. It goes tenths after the decimal, then hundredths, then thousands, then 10,000s. So this is 4/10. Rather than reading it as 0.4, I read it as 4/10. This 0.35 would be read as 35 hundredths. Can be reduced down to 7 20ths. I can divide both of these by 5. And the last one, 7.28. I can read that as 7 because it's still a whole number and that's in front of the decimal. And then 28 over 100 because it's 2 places over. Okay, the 7 stays the same. I reduce the 28 over 100, dividing both by 2 to 14 over 50. And then I keep the 7 again, but now I reduce the 14 over 50 to 7 over 25. And that would be my final answer. Okay, now you try 0.8. That would be 8/10, which finally goes down to 4/5. 0.04, 4/100, which reduces to 2/50, which reduces to 1/25. 3.36, that would be 3/36 over 100. 3 stays the same. Reduce that to 18 over 50. 3 stays the same. Reduces to 9 over 25. How do I express decimals as percents? You're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right and just add the percent sign. Here's examples. Express 0.375 as a percent. You're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right and add the percent sign. So I move it over once. I move it over a second time. That changes it to 37.5, and then just put the percent symbol on it. Let's convert 2.867 to a percent. Okay, I move the decimal once to the right, a second time to the right. That changes it to 286.7, and then you add the percent. You could also just see it as taking the decimal and multiplying it by 100. Okay, you give it a try. 0.625, 62.5%. Okay, we want to make sure there are at least 2 digits at the decimal points. Add a 0 where needed. This does not change the value. So I have 0.7. Okay, before I convert, I need to make sure I have enough numbers to move over twice. So I'm going to add a 0. Now I'm going to solve. Move over twice and get 70%. How do I express percents as decimals? Now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to move the decimal 2 places to the left when I have a decimal, when I have a percent, and want to make it a decimal. And then we just remove the percent sign. So I have 56.25%. I want to make that a decimal. Move the decimal 2 places to the left and remove the percent sign. So 56.25%. Move the decimal twice over to the left. And that gives me 0.5625. 125%. Well, there's no decimal there, but there is always a decimal, and that decimal is always at the end of the number. So there's a decimal after the 5. I move it over twice, and that gives me 1.25 as a decimal. And this makes sense because if I have 100%, it means I have 1 whole, and I have 25 extra, which would be the 0.25. Okay, now you try. 97% as a decimal is 0.97. Okay, before I do the 3.5%, I'm going to add a 0 to the front. Doesn't change anything. You get 0.035. And then finally, 42.8, 0.428. How do I express fractions as percents? You can set up a proportion and set it out of 100, or you can just change the fraction to a decimal and then change the decimal to a percent. Either way is fine. So if I wanted to do it for 1/4 as a percent, I could set it up as out of 100 proportion. So it'd say 1/4 is equal to what out of 100? Check to see how you would convert the first denominator to 100. How do I get 4 to become 100? I multiply by 25. Now I do the same thing to the numerator. and that gives me 25 over 100. And then I know that 25 out of 100 is 25%. Because percent means out of 100. So once you get the top out of where the number is at top is out of 100, then that is going to be your percent. Okay, you give it a try. 3/5 is a percent. Okay, you'd have 3/5. I want to make 5 100, so I multiply it by 20. I do the same to the top, so whatever I do to the bottom, I do the top, multiply the 3 by 20. That gives me 60, and 6 out of 100 is the same as 60%. Okay, you try these. 26 hundredths is 26%. 7/50ths is 14%. 6/25ths is 24%. And 3/10ths is 30%. Or you can express fractions as percents by long division. So I take the 1/4, and I know that 1/4, if I divided it 4 into the 1, I'd get 0.25. And then I just convert it by moving it 2 places over, and then add the percent symbol onto it. So it'd be 25% or 25.0%, which is the same thing. Okay, we would use this method if it was numbers that are hard to get to become out of 100. So for example, 7/8. 7/8 to become 100 is a little more difficult. So this is when we would use the long division setup. So I would divide 7 by 8, which would give me 0.875. Move the decimal over to the right, and I get 87.5%. 5/4 would be 1.25. Moved over twice, I get 125%. And then finally, 3/8 would be 0.375. Move the decimal over twice, and you get 37.5%. How do I express percents as fractions? Okay, you want to divide the number by 100, and then remove the percent symbol, and then simplify. So 30%, it would be 30 out of 100, which reduces to 3/10. 6% would be 6 out of 100, which reduces to 3 over 50. 180% would be 180 out of 100, which reduces to 18 over 10, because I can divide them both by 10, which then reduces to 9/5. So remember, percent just means out of 100, so you just take the percent, put out of 100, and then reduce. And that can be equivalent at the end of 1 4/5. Okay, you try 35%. Would be 7/20ths. 5% would be 1/20th. 130% would be 13/10 or 1 3/10.